All right, so we're live from the Build Show headquarters, world headquarters. Here we are. Hopefully you took the time to watch the first video there where we talked about control layers and developing some details for a remodel on one of the projects I'm working with Matt on. We're going to take a deeper dive. We're going to talk about what happens around the windows when we puncture that hole into that real simple wall. Well, how do we rectify all of those control layers upon punching that hole into the wall there, right? So let's dive into this. We'll take a look here and we'll press on. You know, from the other video, you notice that we have, here's our zip wall, we have our 2 inches of foam, our airspace, and then our lap siding sitting on the outside of that. You know, nothing there has changed, but we're now cutting a hole in this wall and we're puncturing all of that. So for the time being, conceptually, all of our control layers stop there. But we need to, connect those control layers from the punctured hole to the window and kind of do that ankle bones connected to the knee bones, connected to the hip bone routine, and take those control layers through our window. So let's talk about how we did that. All right, first thing, as an architect, I've been doing this 27 years. You know, for some that's a long time, for some maybe it's not so long time, but it is what it is. What I can tell you about drawing details, it takes a while for an architect to get up the confidence to understand exactly what they're building, right? So one of the things I pride myself on is I go out to the field and I actually install some of these windows with the builder on different projects. I tell them I come out and we'll install the first 2 together. Now, you could say that I'm doing that to help the builder, but I'm really not. Most of the builders I work with are extremely intelligent people. They're smart, they get it, figure it out. It's more about the collaborative effort that I have a certain set of skills, filters, and knowledge. The builder has a certain set of skills, filters, and knowledge. We don't see things exactly the same because we weren't trained to see things exactly the same. But our outcome needs to be exactly the same. So how do we do that? Well, we go out there, we get all the tools and we get everything ready, and I get out there and then we install a window together and we walk through step by step. Pretty much what I'm going to do right here and now with you guys. And getting back to that one comment, well, it takes some years before you get that knowledge to be able to develop details. These details are drawn at 6 inches to a foot. That means half size, half full scale, right? So these 2x4s here are 3/4 of an inch by 1 3/4 inches. They're half the size of the actual detail. So if I just took this detail and doubled the size, it would be the actual life scale model of what we're doing. Well, when you draw things at scales of 6 inches, you need to understand all the different components because you get to see them all, right? You can't hide something in that dark line and just say, yeah, that's a piece of flashing, it's in there somewhere. No, you have to have the ability to draw the flashing. So you need that understanding of what laps what, how far does it lap. I can't ask guys to put in 10 inches of flashing unless I've taken the time to measure and make sure that 10 inches of flashing goes from this point to that point, right? So that way there, what I'm asking for can be achieved. Imagine that. Drawings have a certain level of intent. Well, that intent needs to match a level of reality that, yeah, we can actually do that, right? So that's the start of a good detail. Let's dive into this. We talked about those control layers. Again, we'll quick review. 1, water. What are we going to say about water? If it don't last, it don't matter. 2, air. 3, vapor. And 4, thermal. In our order of importance. All right, quick quiz. What's the key about control layers? You guessed it. Continuity. Is the key. Have to check that and make sure I spelled it right. Well, wouldn't that be embarrassing, huh? Get caught on film and can't spell? I think I spelled it right. Anyways, just don't look so close. You get the idea. Continuity is the key. All right, let's dive into these details. So, there's our two sills. We put those in, we bring our sheathing up, we have a couple beads of acoustical sealant here, and then our tape comes up, and then at the top of the zip, we bring a piece of tape that runs along the opening there and just seals off that joint. So now we've taken my air barrier layer in the zip and connected it to the framing members. So this basic golf club head is now one part of the air barrier system. The water's pretty self-explanatory. Water's going to hit the window. Hopefully we're buying good enough windows that the manufacturer of the window has a way for water to get out. It goes down on the sill. Notice the little reglet here. This is a sill that you can purchase off the shelf, has the reglet cut in. That reglet is to stop water from turning the corner and going up. It forces the water to come to a bead and then drip. And it drips down and falls down my siding. Any water that goes up into my siding through capillarity, we have the drainage space inside there. So, we're putting the zip wall, we have our 2 inches of rigid insulation, we're adhering that to the wall, attaching that. We need to finish it off. Just like I finished off the bottom of the wall, we're putting a 2x2 buck. We're taking that 2x2 buck and we're screwing it all the way back to that top mud sill. And that finishes it off. It gives me a nice hard surface to now attach my window to. On top of the buck, you notice here, we have a little slope piece of lap siding. Remember we talked a little earlier about what's a good strategy for water, and we talked about 2 words, down and out. All right? So if any water migrates into this cavity, it can now bleed and get into our drainage space and bleed out. Notice that there's no bead of sealant here at the nailing flange. And actually, not only did I omit it, but look what we have here. We have an actual note of what not to do. Do not back caulk and do not tape bottom flange of window. Typical all windows. Why? Because we want to have that ability for any moisture to migrate down into this drainage space and go down and out at the bottom of the wall system. So we took care of water there. Air, we talked about the air barrier. Vapor, we talked about that earlier. Our wall dries in this way and it dries out that way and dries down that way and up that way. Thermal, we have our 2 inches of rigid foam. We have the block here. On top of there, we have our slope. We have a piece of stretch tape here. The beauty of zip stretch tape is it has the ability to contour to surfaces. So, doing this little song and dance on what I'm calling a 1x3 back dam here, right here, solid wood back dam, full width of the RO. What that suggests is any water that comes in, not only do I have a slope pushing it that way, if this wasn't sloped very well, it meets this end dam here, so water can't migrate it up into the system any further. It has to fall and move out of the system that way. So water's fully taken care of. Back dam, slope sill, stretch tape to drainage space. Water taken care of. Air. We have our air barrier continuity. Comes in there, the stretch tape goes over the top of that to the framing member. That's going to go around the 4 sides of the window and basically seal that up. We have, you can see here, after the window gets installed, we'll add some expanding foam in there. Now, the expanding foam is a choice that I make. I've done many houses. This is a pretty standard detail. I've taken houses all the way down to, 0.5 0.13, 0.16 air tightness levels using details like this. Some of you are going to come back when you see the video and say, you know, first of all, don't come back and just say, hey, the expanding foam or whatever you don't agree with is a dumb idea. If you're going to comment on the video, have a substantiated comment so that we can all learn from it. Saying something is expanding foam's a dumb idea really doesn't help anything, right? Because you haven't described why you don't think it's going to work. I have a whole bunch of reasons why I think it works. I have a whole bunch of experiences on how it works. So it's the choice that I use. Some people would put a backer rod in there and use sealant. That's effective. I like my way better. The insulator usually does that. They're very talented professionals. Their attention to detail is impeccable. I trust them. They do a great job. It works for me. All right, so we get that air seal. So basically, we have our air barrier coming up, and then with the use of the expanding foam, now that connects our frame structure to the window. And then it migrates up through the window, and we'll look at the jambs and head to see how that stuff gets integrated. But basically, I've connected my lower wall to the window now. We've punched that opening, and we have continuity across our water layer, our air control layer, vapor, and our thermal control layer across the sill. Let's move up into the wall. Moving up to the jamb detail. The jamb detail, unlike the sill and head detail, is actually a plan detail, not a section detail, right? So this is a horizontal slice in the building rather than a vertical slice, which is what the sill and the head is. But this one's still drawn at 6-inch scale or half full-size scale. You can see the window there in the rough opening. This gives you a nice cross-section of the wall systems that we've been talking to in a plan view, right? You got your jack stud, sorry. For all you framers out there, please apologize, just talked a little too fast. We have our jack, we have our king, and we have our common stud there. We have our zip sheathing, air barrier comes in. We have our tape, turns the corner on there and seals that up to the opening. We have our 2x buck that gets attached to the jack stud, and then our window then gets attached to the buck. We have our 2 inches of rigid insulation. Here you can see our 1x3 furring strips that create, here's that airspace, right? That provides drainage vertically through our system. And notice here, we have our furring, but more importantly, the furring here, I split it so that we have the ability to nail our trim for our windows, but we can also catch the tail end of the siding in that furring strip. So that piece of furring is doing double duty. It's catching both of those systems for us, right? As we migrate into the wall, we have a piece of flashing, I don't know which one it is here, 6-inch adhered flashing that basically turns the corner and flashes the opening. We put the window in there. The window gets sealed with a continuous bead of sealant at window jamb flange typical, basically back caulking the window right there. So that basically seals our window to the framing and maintains that continuity across the system, right? You can see here we have our level of expanding foam that also completes the air barrier across the system, connecting our rough frame to our window and providing that all-important word. I'm going to write it on every sheet for you. Continuity. Why? Because repeat after me. Continuity is the key. All right? No sense in doing something halfway. Might as well not even do it at all. All right. Pressing on. We come to the head detail. The head detail, very similar to the sill detail. It's a section detail, although it looks pretty darn similar to the jamb detail, just rotated 90 degrees. So you'll see our window comes up. We have our framed wall. We have our header here with our plywood in the middle. We don't have an insulated header. Why? Because we have 2 inches of outboard outsulation here. We have our zip wall that connects from the top plate to the window framed opening, seals that all up. And remember, this goes up and then connects up into our roof system there. All right, so we maintain that continuity. Remember, let's say it again. Continuity is what? Continuity is the key. For those of you out there that are musical minded, I think there's something to be said there for a nice building science song. Continuity is the key. I don't know. I'm not music minded, so we're going to leave it right there. All right, so let's jump back on this. All right, we have our header, we have our head plate, we have our 2x2 buck. 2x2 buck gets attached to the framing, window gets attached to the buck, window gets properly flashed. We have a little head flashing here that kicks out. Notice we have a little joint here. All right, it's an open joint. Notice we don't call for any caulking in there. Why? Well, remember, we have a drainage space. What is the 2 things that a drainage space needs? It needs to go down and out. All right, down and out. We're not building furniture here. We're building a wall assembly that has appropriate decision-making processes, right? We're not trying to close this up. We're not trying to seal it up. Here's a very important lesson when it comes to tape and caulking, sealant, any of those. That if you're going to learn one thing from me in all the videos that I do, anytime you see me, this is probably the most important thing. The minute you break out a roll of tape, a caulk gun, a tube of sealant, don't ask yourself, what am I sealing out? Because that's pretty much assumed. You think you know what you're sealing out. But most importantly, ask yourself the question, what am I sealing in? Because if you think you can build a building without water getting in, God bless you. But I think you're about as naive as they come in that belief. Because water is going to get behind where you don't think water will get. And it needs a way to get out, right? So, down and out. Water's going to get behind this siding. It's getting in there. You know, having some little air open gaps, all that does is promote drying, right? What's the basic drying equation? Things are okay if they get wet. As long as they have the ability to dry more than they get wet, life is good. When things get wet, but don't have the ability to dry, problems, right? We always want to be in this arena, not that arena. It's okay if things get wet, as long as they dry more. So, let's look at this. We have our water coming out. Our bulk water management runs down the outside here. It drips off the window. Our window manufacturer did a fine job, handles all the water management internally in the manufacturing of the window system. Our air barrier continuity, we brought that in. We have our expanding foam sealant here that goes around 4 sides of the window, basically sealing the window to my framing. Framing's attached to my zip. Zip goes up and over the building. I've effectively built that hot air balloon in concept, right? How effective? Well, part of that comes from working with good builders and both of us being on the same page. It was a real treat this afternoon. I got to sit down with the framer and Matt. We reviewed these details. And, you know, the 20 minutes that I get to spend with the framer and Matt talking about drawings and marking them up, and that actually became kind of the click of, hey, let's do a video about this. But in talking with the framer, making sure we're all on the same page, that's how we get to that level of success, when we're all pushing in the same direction, all right? So, our insulation, we have some limited, rock wool inside there. We have our 2 inches on the outside, our drainage space. It's all taken care of. The window's installed. We've maintained continuity through our whole system. We have our 4 control layers being taken care of, even at all of the punched openings, at the windows. Continuity is the key, and it is maintained. And we have a successful system. Look forward to talking to you some more. See you next time on The Build Show.